The night my world cracked open began with something small. A sentence. Thomas kissed my cheek at 6:30, briefcase in hand, and said the words he always said when he wanted me out of the way. Working late tonight. Don't wait up, it wasn't unusual. He'd been working late 3 nights a week for the past month. I'd started to swallow the excuse like bitter medicine, telling myself not to question it. He had deadlines. He was stressed. That's what marriages were. Trust, even when it hurt. But something in the way his eyes slid past mine that evening, distant, almost rehearsed, clawed at me. After he left, the house felt too quiet. I tried to distract myself, cleaning up after dinner, flipping through television channels, but nothing stuck. My mind kept replaying that sentence. Working late. Don't wait up. At 9, I decided to get out. I told myself it was just to take a walk, clear my head. The night air was crisp, the streets alive with chatter and headlights. I drifted aimlessly until the warm glow of a restaurant caught my eye. A little Italian place Thomas and I had visited once on our anniversary. I don't know what pulled me inside. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was desperation. I sat at the bar, ordered a glass of wine, and tried not to think too much. That's when the waiter approached. A young man, smiling politely, holding out a folded receipt. "Ma'am, you forgot this," he said. I frowned. "I didn't order yet." He blinked, then glanced at the slip of paper in his hand. "Oh, sorry. I thought you were with them." "Them?" He nodded toward a booth in the corner, half hidden by shadows. My eyes followed his gesture, my heart already hammering in my chest. The booth was empty now. But 2 wine glasses sat on the table, lipstick smudged on one rim. The plates were cleared, but the impression of bodies lingered. I took the receipt from the waiter's hand, my fingers trembling. 2 entrees. 2 drinks. A dessert shared. The timestamp, 20 minutes earlier, and at the bottom, in neat, bold letters, Thomas W., my husband's name. His signature. The room tilted. My throat went dry. He wasn't at the office. He'd been here. With someone else. I clutched the receipt so tightly it crumpled in my fist. The waiter gave me a puzzled look but moved on, leaving me alone with the truth burning in my hands. I sat frozen, staring at the empty booth, my pulse roaring in my ears. The lipstick on the glass glared at me like a scarlet mark of betrayal. When I finally stumbled outside, the cool air hit me like a slap. The city lights blurred through my tears. He lied. He lied to my face. And now I had proof. But proof was only the beginning, because in that moment, standing on the sidewalk with the receipt burning a hole in my hand, I made a silent vow. If Thomas thought he could hide his secrets, he was wrong. I was going to uncover every single one. I walked home clutching the receipt like it was a knife. Every step heavy, my mind tangled in questions I wasn't ready to face. The streetlights flickered as I passed under them, and for a strange moment, I felt like they were spotlights exposing me, forcing me to see the truth I'd been trying so hard to ignore. By the time I reached the house, my legs were trembling. I slipped inside, shut the door quietly, and leaned against it. Everything looked normal. The couch with its throw blanket draped neatly over the side, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the pile of unopened mail on the table. But the normality felt false, like a stage set. I opened my hand and stared at the crumpled receipt. His name was still there, sharp and undeniable. Thomas W. I could almost hear him, breezy and calm, saying, "Working late." "Rosa, don't wait up." The memory made my blood boil. I paced the living room, whispering to myself, "He's lying. He's lying to my face." My eyes drifted to the clock. 9:42 p.m. If he was sticking to his story, he'd be home after midnight, worn out, claiming he'd been drowning in paperwork. He'd loosen his tie, sigh heavily, and expect me to believe him. I sat on the couch, receipt pressed against my knee, and waited. The minutes crawled. At 10, I poured myself another glass of wine. At 11, I texted Mia, our daughter, just to hear a friendly voice. "Mom, how's schoolwork going?" "Mia, long day?" still writing an essay. You okay? Mom, I'm fine. Just tired. Good luck with the essay. I didn't tell her. How could I? She adored her father. At 12:18 a.m., I heard the garage door. My heart seized. His footsteps followed. Steady, calm, as if he hadn't just ripped the ground out from under me hours earlier. Rosa? His voice drifted from the hallway. You're still up? I forced myself to stay seated, the receipt hidden in my hand. Yeah, I said lightly. Couldn't sleep. He stepped into the living room, loosening his tie, his hair slightly mussed. He looked every inch the tired, hard-working husband, but all I could see was the lipstick-stained glass at that booth. He leaned down to kiss me, and I turned my face just enough for it to land on my cheek. His brow furrowed. Everything okay? Long night, I muttered. He shrugged, setting his briefcase by the wall. Tell me about it. I barely got through half of what I needed to. I studied his face. He was lying so smoothly, so effortlessly, I almost believed him. Almost. Did you eat? I asked carefully. Grabbed a sandwich at the office, he said without hesitation. The lie slid out like butter, and that was when I knew. This wasn't the first time. He'd been practicing. I wanted to scream, to throw the receipt in his face and demand answers. But instead, I swallowed the fire burning in my throat and said nothing. Because if Thomas thought he could outsmart me, he had another thing coming. When he finally went upstairs, I sat in the dark, clutching the receipt. My heart raced, my mind spinning faster than it ever had before. I had proof he was lying. Now I needed to know the rest. The next day, I began with small steps. At breakfast, I watched him butter his toast, scroll through his phone, sip his coffee. Busy today? I asked, casual as ever. He nodded. Late again. Don't wait up. The words stabbed, but I smiled faintly, playing the role of the trusting wife. Of course. When he left, I gave it 10 minutes, then slipped out behind him. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, tailing him at a distance. At first, he drove toward the office. My heart sank. Was I really just paranoid? But halfway there, he turned. Down a side street. Past rows of shops. Toward the restaurant district, I followed at a crawl. Heart pounding, and then I saw it. The same Italian restaurant from last night. He pulled into the parking lot, parked in the back, and stepped out. I ducked lower in my seat, watching as he smoothed his tie, checked his reflection in the car window, and then walked toward the entrance. Not the tired, overworked husband. No, he looked alive. Almost eager. Moments later, she appeared. A woman in a red dress, heels clicking against the pavement. She smiled when she saw him, and he smiled back, warm, unguarded, the kind of smile he hadn't given me in years. My breath caught. He held the door open for her, his hand brushing the small of her back. And then they disappeared inside. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The truth was no longer a whisper of suspicion. It was here in front of me, undeniable. My husband wasn't working late. He was having an affair, and the receipt in my pocket was only the beginning of his unraveling. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, though in reality it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. My chest felt heavy, my breath shallow, as though every beat of my heart was squeezing my lungs tighter and tighter. There it was. The thing I'd been too afraid to say out loud, too afraid to imagine. Thomas was cheating. And not just with a faceless stranger. I'd seen her, the woman in the red dress, stepping into the restaurant as if she belonged at his side. The rage burned hot and fast. But beneath it was something colder, humiliation. Every working late, every brushed-off kiss, every time he came home smelling faintly of cologne and wine, it was all a performance. And I'd been the audience, clapping along like a fool. I didn't storm into the restaurant. I wanted to. God, I wanted to march in, slam that receipt down on their table, and scream until everyone turned to stare. But something stopped me. A voice deep inside whispered, "Not yet. Don't let him know you're onto him. Not until you're ready." So I sat there, nails digging into the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe until my pulse slowed. If Thomas thought I was blind, then I would keep my eyes open wider than ever. I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo of his car in the lot. Then another of the restaurant entrance. Proof. Hard. Undeniable proof. Finally, I drove away, my hands trembling the whole time. Back home, the house felt like a stranger's. I wandered from room to room, staring at the framed wedding photo in the hallway, at the indentation of his pillow on the bed, at the little notes he used to leave me years ago, back when our love had been real, or had it ever been. I sank onto the couch and pulled out the crumpled receipt again, smoothing it with my palm. My stomach turned. This was only one night's evidence. How many more were hidden behind his lies? That evening, Thomas returned at his usual time, just after midnight. His tie was loosened, his hair mussed just enough to look believable. He tossed his briefcase down with a weary sigh. "Long day," he muttered, heading for the kitchen. I followed him with my eyes, studying every movement, every gesture. The way he avoided looking at me too directly. The faint smile that lingered on his lips, like a secret he carried back into my home. "Did you eat?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, though my throat was tight. "Sandwich at the office," he lied smoothly, just like the night before. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I nodded, pretending to buy it. "You must be starving," he shrugged. "Just tired." As he disappeared upstairs, I sat on the couch gripping my phone. I had the receipt, the photos, the truth. But something in me wanted more, needed more. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it. He'd twist it back on me, call me paranoid, tell me I was imagining things. No, I couldn't give him that power. I needed to catch him so thoroughly, so completely, that not even his silver tongue could wriggle free. The next morning, while he showered, I crept into his office at home. I rifled through drawers, checked his planner, scrolled through his laptop. Nothing. He was meticulous, covering his tracks. But then I checked his phone. He always left it charging by the nightstand while he shaved. My hands trembled as I swiped it open, my stomach twisting with guilt and adrenaline. Messages. Dozens of them. Not from work, as I might have expected. Not from a colleague or a client. From someone saved only as A. I scrolled quickly, my heart in my throat. "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. Same time tomorrow?" I stopped breathing. And then I saw the one that turned my blood cold. "She'll never find out." "Don't worry." My vision blurred with rage. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I shoved it back onto the nightstand just as the shower shut off. I hurried downstairs, forcing myself to move calmly, my body screaming with fury. He came down moments later, dressed, hair damp, briefcase in hand. "I'll be home late," he said casually. The words stabbed like knives. I smiled faintly, my voice even. "Of course, darling. Don't wait up." He paused, glanced at me strangely, then shrugged and left. As the door shut behind him, I sat alone in the quiet kitchen, my hands curled into fists. The lies had a pattern now, a rhythm, and I wasn't going to be the audience anymore. I was going to be the director. Because if Thomas wanted to play games, I was ready to play harder. And when I was done, he wouldn't just lose his secrets, he'd lose everything. The morning after reading those texts, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I moved through the house in a haze, every object tainted by betrayal. The coffee pot hissed like it was mocking me. The fridge hummed like a steady reminder, "You've been living with a liar." I sat at the kitchen table, the crumpled receipt beside me, my mind racing in a dozen directions. Confront him? Too soon. Gather more evidence? Absolutely, but how? Margaret. My sister was the only person I trusted enough to tell. She'd always been sharper than me, less forgiving, and she never liked Thomas much. Maybe she'd seen something in him I had been too blind to acknowledge. I called her mid-morning, my hands clammy. She picked up on the second ring. "Rosa? You sound like hell. What's wrong? Can you come over?" My voice broke on the last word. "Please." Half an hour later, she was at my door. Margaret had that kind of presence that filled a room, tall, confident, with eyes that seemed to slice through pretense. She took one look at me, at the receipt clutched in my hand, and her mouth tightened. Talk. I spilled everything. The late nights, the receipt, the woman in the red dress, the texts on his phone. Every word felt like acid in my mouth. When I finished, Margaret leaned back, folding her arms. I knew it. I always knew he was too slick. Men like him think they're clever because they can lie without blinking. I swallowed hard. What do I do? You don't confront him yet, she said firmly. That's what he'll expect. He'll deny it, twist it, make you look crazy. No. You build a case. A case? She nodded. You gather every scrap of proof. Photos, receipts, texts. Enough to burn through every excuse he can throw at you. When you confront him, you'll leave him with nothing to hide behind. Her words steadied me. For the first time in days, I felt like I had a plan. That evening, I told Thomas I was visiting a friend for coffee. Instead, Margaret and I drove to the Italian restaurant. We sat in a corner booth, disguises half-hearted, her sunglasses, my scarf pulled high. The waiter from the other night recognized me immediately. Back again? He asked cheerfully. I forced a smile. Yes, tell me. The man who was here yesterday. Tall brown hair, suit, with a woman in a red dress. Do you know them? The waiter hesitated. They come in a lot. Same booth. Always together. My stomach dropped. Always. Margaret leaned forward, her voice sharp. Do you know her name? The waiter shook his head quickly. No, ma'am, sorry, just... They seem close. Close. The word tasted bitter. When he walked away, Margaret grabbed my hand. There it is. Corroboration. He's been parading around with her in public, Rosa. He's not even hiding it well. I blinked back tears. I thought he loved me. Margaret's face softened for a moment. He loved convenience. He loved control. But he doesn't love you if he's doing this. I wanted to collapse under the weight of it. But instead, I straightened my shoulders. Then we'll catch him. The next step came faster than I expected. 2 nights later, Thomas gave me the same excuse. Working late. Don't wait up. As soon as he left, Margaret picked me up. We followed his car again, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear. He didn't go to the office. Didn't even pretend this time. Straight to the restaurant. Same spot in the back lot. We watched from across the street as the woman arrived. Red dress again. She laughed as she met him, the sound carrying faintly in the night air. He placed a hand on her arm, guiding her inside. Margaret raised her phone, snapping photos one after another. Proof. Solid. Undeniable. I sat frozen in the passenger seat, my nails digging into my palms. The photos captured their smiles, their touch, their intimacy, and each click of the camera felt like another dagger in my chest. When they disappeared inside, Margaret lowered the phone. That's enough for now. You have him. But as we drove home, something twisted in me. Proof was one thing. Understanding was another. Who was she? Why her? And how long had this been going on? I wasn't going to sleep until I found out. That night, as Thomas slipped into bed beside me with the smell of perfume clinging faintly to his shirt, I lay stiff, my eyes open in the dark, and I made a vow. Tomorrow, I would start digging deeper, because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about secrets, and I was going to uncover them all. Sleep barely brushed me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every detail. The receipt in my pocket, the woman in the red dress, the easy way Thomas lied. Each memory felt like a shard of glass under my skin. By dawn, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing. Margaret's words echoed in my head. Build a case. Don't give him room to lie. When Thomas shuffled in, yawning, I forced myself to smile. Morning, he smiled back faintly, pouring himself coffee. Morning, Rosa. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Stress, maybe. He sipped his coffee. Don't worry, I'll be working late again tonight. The lie slid out so easily it almost made me laugh. Working late. It was like a punchline now. I nodded. Of course. Just don't overwork yourself. He kissed my cheek and left. And the moment the door shut, my whole body tensed with determination. Today, I wasn't just going to follow him. Today, I was going to dig. Margaret came over mid-morning, her sharp eyes already scanning me. You didn't sleep. No, I admitted. I kept thinking, who is she? Why her? Margaret dropped her bag on the table. Then let's find out. We started with Thomas's office. It wasn't hard to get in. He never suspected I'd snoop. I'd spent years respecting his privacy, believing we had nothing to hide from each other. Now that felt like the dumbest thing I'd ever done. Margaret rifled through drawers, pulled open files, scanned documents. I checked his laptop again, though he was careful, too careful. No messages, no photos, no calendar entries that betrayed him. Then Margaret's voice called softly. Rosa, look at this. I hurried to her side. She held up a folded piece of paper from the back of a drawer. It was a hotel receipt, not from the Italian restaurant, from a downtown boutique hotel. Dated last week, 2 nights, 1 room. Paid in cash, my breath caught. Oh my God. Margaret scanned it, her jaw tight. He's not just having dinners, Rosa. He's taking her overnight. This is bigger than you thought. I pressed my hand to my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. How long? Long enough for hotel staff to know them, she muttered grimly. We copied the receipt, tucked it into my shoebox of evidence. Proof was stacking piece by piece, but proof didn't ease the ache in my chest. If anything, it made it heavier. He hadn't just strayed. He'd built a secret life, brick by brick, while I slept beside him in the same bed. That evening, when Thomas claimed he'd be late at the office, Margaret and I were ready. We parked a block away from the Italian restaurant, but this time we didn't stop there. We watched as he and the woman finished their dinner, laughing together, his hand brushing hers. And then we followed. They didn't go home. They didn't part ways. They drove to that boutique hotel. I watched from the car as they walked through the lobby doors, her red dress bright even in the dim light. He carried her bag. She leaned into him like they were husband and wife. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached so badly I thought I might pass out. Margaret snapped photo after photo, her jaw clenched. There's no denying it now. But I didn't look at the photos. I kept my eyes fixed on the lobby doors, waiting, hoping against reason that he'd come out. That he'd change his mind. That he'd remember me. He didn't. We sat there for nearly an hour. The lights in their hotel room flicked on, then off again. That was when I broke. Tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. He's not coming back, Margaret. He doesn't love me anymore. Margaret pulled me into her arms, her voice firm. No, Rosa, he doesn't respect you. That's different. And that means you have to respect yourself. Don't let him keep you in the dark. Her words cut through the fog in my head. She was right. I couldn't just sit back and let him lie to me, night after night, as if my feelings didn't matter, but confronting him wasn't enough anymore. If Thomas was building a life with her, then I needed to know what that life was and what it meant for me. So when Margaret dropped me home, I didn't go to bed. I sat at the table with my shoebox of evidence, receipts, photos, hotel slips, and began to plan. Tomorrow, I would look her in the eye. Tomorrow, I would meet the woman who thought she could replace me. I woke up with a plan already carved into my mind. The shock and the tears of the night before had hardened into something colder, sharper. Curiosity, resolve. I needed to see her, not from across a parking lot, not in stolen glances through a windshield, but face to face. I wanted to know who she was. What she had that I apparently didn't. When Thomas kissed my cheek that morning and gave me his usual line, "Working late, don't wait up," I almost laughed in his face. Instead, I smiled sweetly and waved him off. The moment he pulled away, I called Margaret. "She's at the boutique hotel with him," I told her, my voice low, like I was confessing a crime. "We saw her walk in. That means she's staying there. That's where I'll find her." Margaret's sharp intake of breath carried through the phone. "Rosa, you can't just—" "I have to," I cut her off. I need to see her with my own eyes. I need to hear her voice. I need to understand what he's risking everything for. There was a long pause. Then Margaret's voice hardened. Fine, but you're not going alone. I'll meet you there. By early afternoon, we were parked across the street from the hotel. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly they ached. The boutique hotel looked harmless, charming even, with ivy climbing its walls and white curtains in every window. But to me, it loomed like a fortress hiding my husband's betrayal. Are you ready for this? Margaret asked. No, I admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. We waited. The hours dragged until, at last, the glass doors slid open. She appeared. The woman in the red dress, though today she wore a pale blouse and tailored slacks, walked out with her phone pressed to her ear. Up close, she was striking. Not movie star beautiful, but polished, confident, the kind of woman who drew attention without trying. Her laugh floated across the street as she ended her call. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Margaret squeezed my arm. Now's your chance. I stepped out of the car before I could lose my nerve. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but somehow they carried me forward until I was standing on the sidewalk in her path. She nearly bumped into me, startled. Oh, I'm sorry. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were bright, curious, not guarded like Thomas's had been lately. She tilted her head. Do I know you? I swallowed hard. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. No, but I know you. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by something else. Suspicion. Excuse me? I lifted the folded receipt from my pocket. You were with my husband last night. Her lips parted. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then she laughed softly, though it sounded strained. I think you're mistaken. No, I said, my voice firm now. I'm not. The air between us grew taut, like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, she sighed and slipped her phone into her bag. You must be Rosa. The sound of my name on her lips made my stomach lurch. She extended a hand like we were meeting at a luncheon. I'm Anna. I didn't take her hand. How long? I asked. Her smile faltered. Does it matter? It does to me. She hesitated, then glanced away. Almost a year. The ground tilted beneath me. A year. All those nights. All those lies. And I hadn't seen it. Margaret's voice cut in from behind me. You're proud of that. Anna's gaze snapped back to mine. I didn't come looking for him, Rosa. He found me. The words stung like acid. He's been lying to both of us, she continued. Did he tell you he was working late? Because that's what he tells me too, that he's buried in the office, that you don't understand him anymore. My heart cracked. And you believed him? Anna's eyes softened for the first time. I wanted to. Until now. We stood there, two women tied together by one man's lies, both bleeding from wounds he'd inflicted. Finally, Anna stepped back. Look, Rosa, whatever you decide to do with him, that's between you two, but I'm done. I won't be part of this anymore. And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement until she vanished around the corner. I stood frozen, shaking, staring at the spot where she'd disappeared. Margaret touched my shoulder. Well, now you know, I whispered, my voice raw. He's been lying to both of us. Margaret's jaw tightened. Then it's time to stop letting him write the story. It's time you take control. I clenched the receipt in my fist until it tore. Anna might have walked away, but I couldn't, because Thomas was still in my house. My bed. My life. And tonight, when he came home with his same tired lies, I'd be waiting. The walk back to the car felt like moving underwater. My legs were heavy, my ears rang, and Margaret's voice barely pierced the fog around me. You see, she said, her tone sharp but protective. He's been running two lives. He's not even original, feeding her the same lines he gives you. I gripped the car door handle until my knuckles turned white. A year, Margaret. A whole year. While I cooked his dinners, ironed his shirts, and believed every damn word out of his mouth. Margaret slid into the passenger seat, her jaw tight. Then you know what to do now. But did I? As I drove home, Anna's face lingered in my mind. Not smug, not triumphant, just tired, almost regretful. She hadn't looked like a mistress reveling in her stolen prize. She'd looked like me, lied to, used, discarded. When we pulled into my driveway, the familiar ache pressed down on me. My house looked the same. The rose bushes I pruned every spring. The welcome mat that still had R&T embroidered on it from when we were newlyweds. Yet now it felt like a stage set, flimsy and fake, ready to collapse with the truth I carried inside me. Margaret touched my arm. Listen, tonight when he comes home with that working late story, don't confront him yet. Let him hang himself with his lies. You've got the photos. The receipts. Her words. Build your moment. When you do confront him, he won't have anywhere to run. I nodded, though my stomach churned. I just don't know if I'm ready to hear him lie to me again. You're stronger than you think, she said firmly. That night, I sat at the kitchen table waiting. The shoebox of evidence rested beside me. The restaurant receipt, the hotel slip, the photos Margaret had taken. I stared at them until the edges blurred, trying to decide if I wanted to use them as weapons or shields. At 12:23 a.m., the garage door creaked open. My pulse spiked. Thomas walked in, loosening his tie, looking perfectly rehearsed in his role. Rosa, he said warmly, as if nothing in our world had shifted. You're still awake, I forced a smile. I couldn't sleep. He kissed my forehead, the gesture automatic. I could still smell her perfume on his shirt. Long night? I asked casually. The longest, he sighed, dropping his briefcase. Back-to-back meetings. Barely had time to eat. I nearly laughed at the boldness of it. Barely had time to eat when I'd watched him wine and dine her hours ago. Poor thing, I murmured, masking my disgust. At least it's over now. He nodded, stretched, and headed upstairs. Don't stay up too late, Rosa. I watched his back as he disappeared, every nerve in my body screaming. He didn't even flinch. Didn't sense that I knew everything, and that made me angrier than anything else. The next morning, I rose before him. I set the shoebox on the kitchen table, opened, evidence spilling like spilled blood across the wood. When he came down, his eyes immediately flicked to it. What's all this? He asked, voice tight. Receipts, I said evenly. Photos, hotel slips, texts. His face froze. I stood, my hands flat on the table. Tell me the truth, Thomas. Who is she? He blinked, then shook his head with a practiced sigh. Rosa, you've got it all wrong. Don't you dare, I snapped. Don't you dare tell me I'm imagining this. I've seen you. I've followed you. I spoke to her, Thomas. I spoke to Anna. His eyes widened at the name. That flicker of recognition was all the confirmation I needed. He rubbed his temples. This isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think. My voice broke. You've been lying to me for a year. A year of working late. A year of creeping around with her while you came home to me like nothing was wrong. The mask slipped then. His shoulders sagged, his mouth tightening. For the first time, he didn't deny it. I whispered. Why? He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw no remorse, no love, only exhaustion. Because I wanted more, Rosa. More than what we had. The words sliced deeper than any blade. Margaret stepped into the kitchen then, having stayed the night in case things went bad. She crossed her arms. Well, Thomas, congratulations. Rosa has the proof. And when the lawyers see it, you'll be stripped bare. His gaze flicked between us, anger flaring. You've been spying on me? You've been betraying me! I shot back. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. He finally grabbed his briefcase, muttering, We'll talk tonight. But as the door slammed behind him, Margaret turned to me, her face pale but steady. Rosa, he's not going to stop. Not until he's forced to. You need to decide. Are you going to keep letting him live this double life, or are you going to end it? I stared at the evidence on the table, my tears falling onto the paper. I knew then. The lies had to end. And if Thomas wouldn't end them, I would. The kitchen still smelled like Thomas's cologne even after he slammed the door. I sat staring at the shoebox of evidence, my tears blurring the ink on the receipts. For so long, I had clung to the belief that our marriage was solid, that every sacrifice I made had built a foundation no one could shake. But now the walls were crumbling, and Thomas had lit the match himself. Margaret sat across from me, her hands folded, watching me like a hawk. "You've seen him lie. You've seen him cheat. You've seen him throw away everything you built. What are you going to do now?" I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I don't know. I thought confronting him would... I thought it would make him realize what he's risking. That maybe he'd beg for forgiveness." Margaret leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Rosa, listen to me. Men like Thomas don't beg. They manipulate. He'll twist this back on you, make you feel like the crazy one, and keep seeing her behind your back. You need to take control before he does." Her words made sense, but my heart rebelled. Divorce. The word hovered like a guillotine. Was I ready for that? To unravel decades of shared life? To destroy the illusion of family for Mia? To face the world as a woman betrayed? I whispered, "If I leave, what happens to everything we built? The house, the savings, Mia's future?" Margaret cut me off. "If you stay, you'll lose yourself." That's worse. I couldn't argue with her. My reflection in the window already looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes. Lines carved by grief. That afternoon, I tried to go about my day. I cleaned the living room, folded laundry, cooked dinner I knew Thomas wouldn't eat. Every action felt pointless, like polishing furniture in a house already scheduled for demolition. Mia called in the evening. Her voice was bright, full of campus chatter. "Mom, I aced my exam. Dad told me you've been stressed. Are you okay?" I forced cheer into my voice. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." "I'm fine, just tired." I didn't tell her. How could I? She adored her father. The truth would break her heart, and I wasn't ready to shatter hers on top of mine. After we hung up, Margaret sat beside me on the couch. "She deserves the truth too, Rosa, but not yet." "Not until you're ready." I nodded silently. Thomas came home later than usual that night. He stepped inside quietly, almost cautiously, as if he knew the air was different now. He glanced at the empty shoebox on the counter. I had hidden the evidence away again, and then at me. "You've been busy," he said flatly. I looked up from the book I wasn't really reading. "And you've been working late." His jaw tightened, but he didn't take the bait. He walked past me, heading upstairs. I listened to the creak of the floorboards, my heart aching with every step. Margaret leaned close, whispering, "See?" He's rattled. "He knows you're watching now. That's power, Rosa. Don't waste it." But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Thomas slept beside me, his breath even and calm, I realized I needed more than power. I needed clarity, because one question still haunted me. If Anna was really out of the picture, if she truly meant it when she said she was done, then why had Thomas looked so calm tonight? Almost smug even? What if there was more? What if Anna wasn't the only secret? The next morning, Margaret suggested a private investigator. "They'll dig deeper than we ever could. Phone records, bank statements. If he's hiding something bigger, they'll find it." At first, I resisted. It felt too drastic, too final. But then I remembered the hotel receipt tucked in the shoebox, the texts from A, the year of lies. I called the number Margaret gave me. A woman named Carla answered, her voice brisk but kind. She didn't flinch when I told her everything. She'd heard it all before. "I'll need details," she said. "His schedule, his habits, the places he frequents. Leave the rest to me." It was terrifying, handing my marriage over to a stranger. But also liberating. By evening, Carla had already started. She texted me after shadowing Thomas from the office. "Your husband left at 6:15. He didn't go home. He didn't go to the restaurant. He met someone else at a cafe on 7th Street. Blonde, younger, mid-30s, different woman." I nearly dropped the phone. Margaret read over my shoulder, her face darkening. So Anna wasn't the only one. The room spun. One affair was betrayal. Two? That was a pattern. A sickness. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "How many women has he lied to? How many times has he lied to me?" Margaret wrapped an arm around me. "Does it matter?" You've seen enough. He's a serial cheater, Rosa, and now you have proof. But it did matter. Because for every new woman, for every new lie, another piece of my past with Thomas crumbled. Birthdays, anniversaries, vacations. Were they all tainted? Were they all built on sand while he built secret lives in the shadows? I stared at Carla's message again, the words burning into me. Blonde, younger, mid-30s. Another woman. Another betrayal. And with that, my path became clear. It wasn't just about catching him anymore. It was about ending this, before he destroyed what was left of me. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. The message from Carla, the private investigator, still burned in my mind. Another woman, a different one, younger, blonde, mid-30s. It was one thing to picture Thomas sneaking around with Anna, the woman in the red dress. But now, knowing there were more, that he was juggling not one double life but possibly 3, 4, maybe even more, that knowledge cracked something inside me beyond repair. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring at the shoebox full of evidence. Receipts, photos, notes, and now, text messages from Carla confirming what I'd tried so hard not to believe. This wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't about me not being enough. It was about him. Thomas wasn't just unfaithful. He was addicted. He craved the thrill, the secrecy, the lies. He'd been slipping out at night, smiling at me in the morning, and running circles around women who didn't even know about each other. And I had been the fool holding the whole illusion together. Margaret joined me, bleary-eyed, clutching her own cup of coffee. "You didn't sleep, did you?" I shook my head. "He's been with another woman, Margaret. I can't keep up. I can't keep track. Who even is my husband anymore?" Margaret set her cup down with a firm clink. "He's not your husband, Rosa, not really. Not the man you married. That man's gone, and what's left is a stranger who doesn't deserve you." I closed my eyes. "Then I need to end this." "But how?" She leaned forward. "You hit him where it hurts. You've already got proof for a divorce lawyer. But before you walk away, you make sure he understands what he's lost. You make him choke on it." The thought filled me with both dread and a strange new fire. For weeks I had felt powerless, like a pawn in his game. But now I could flip the board. Carla's updates rolled in like clockwork that day. He left the office early. Met the blonde again. They were laughing, holding hands. He bought her roses. They drove to the same hotel as before. Different room. Paid in cash. The receipts, the lies, the repetition. It was all mechanical for him. Like he had a system. I felt sick. My hands trembled as I texted back, "Keep documenting everything." "I'll need it," Carla replied instantly. "Already on it." Margaret watched me, her expression torn between sympathy and satisfaction. "Every message you get is another nail in his coffin. Hold on to them. You're going to need all of it," I nodded numbly. But a part of me was already planning something bigger. I didn't just want to leave Thomas. I wanted to expose him. That night, when Thomas finally returned home, I was waiting in the kitchen again. He wore his usual expression, calm, collected, a little tired from his long day at the office. "Hi, Rosa," he said, hanging his coat. "Sorry I'm late." My heart twisted at how easily the lies rolled off his tongue. I smiled faintly. "It's fine. Dinner's in the fridge." His eyes flicked to mine, searching, but I kept my face neutral. Let him think he still had the upper hand. He sat, ate a little, chatted about meaningless office gossip. I watched, quiet, filing every detail away, the way he avoided looking me in the eye too long, the faint whiff of perfume that wasn't mine, the smirk he didn't realize he carried. Finally, he stood and kissed my cheek before heading upstairs. "Good night, Rosa." I waited until I heard the bedroom door shut. Then I opened my phone. Carla's last message stared back at me. "He's in deep, Rosa. This isn't going to stop unless you make it stop." My hand hovered over the contact list. Divorce lawyers, family, friends. But before I dialed anyone, I texted Carla. Can you get me photos of all of them? Not just Anna, every woman he's with. Her reply was quick. Give me 3 days. 3 days. 3 days until I had the full picture of the man I'd been sleeping beside for decades. 3 days until I stopped being Rosa, the betrayed wife, and became Rosa, the woman who would end his web of lies. The next morning, Thomas acted as though nothing had changed. He kissed my forehead, told me not to wait up, and walked out the door with his briefcase. But this time, I didn't cry. This time, I started planning. Margaret sat beside me, nodding approvingly as I laid out my ideas. First, we gather everything. Every receipt, every photo, every text. Then we pick the right time. A birthday. An anniversary. Some event where he expects your silence the most. And then Rosa, her smile was sharp. You pull the curtain down. I imagined it. Thomas standing there, his smug little smile wiped clean as I laid his entire double life bare. Not just to me, but to everyone who thought they knew him. His friends. His colleagues. Maybe even Mia, though the thought of her heartbreak made my chest ache. Still, the image burned bright in my mind. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt powerful. That night, I went upstairs after Thomas was already asleep. I watched him for a long time, his face calm, his chest rising and falling, his hand curled on the blanket like he hadn't a care in the world. I wondered how many times he'd lain beside me like this, already planning his next lie. Already planning which woman he'd take out, which hotel he'd use, which excuse he'd feed me. And as I stared at him, one thought crystallized in my mind. Sharp and unshakable. He has no idea what's coming. The next 3 days stretched on like a lifetime. Every hour felt heavy with secrets, but this time the weight wasn't crushing me. It was sharpening me. I had a plan. I had leverage. And soon I would have everything I needed to cut Thomas's lies open in front of him. Carla worked like clockwork, sending me updates. Photos, videos, text summaries of his movements. Every ping on my phone made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to read them. Day 1. Thomas with Anna at lunch. They argued. She left in tears. He didn't chase her. Day 2. Thomas seen with the blonde again, dinner, holding hands. He told her, "You're the only one who gets me." Same hotel afterward. Day 3. New woman. Brunette, early 40s. Met him outside his office. He kissed her cheek. Went to a bar, 3 women in as many days. 3 sets of lies. 3 lives he was juggling while pretending to be the faithful husband at home. By the time the final set of photos came through, Thomas at the bar, his hand on the brunette's lower back while she laughed up at him, I couldn't even cry anymore. The tears had dried up. What replaced them was cold, calculated fury. Margaret sat with me, scrolling through the photos. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It's worse than we thought, I nodded. He's not even hiding it well anymore. He thinks I'll never find out. He thinks I'll always be the fool waiting at home. Margaret met my eyes. So when do you do it? I leaned back, exhaling slowly. His birthday dinner. 1 week from now. He's planning something at that fancy steakhouse with his colleagues. He'll expect me to sit there and smile while he plays the devoted husband. Instead, I'll end it, Margaret grinned, fierce and proud. Now that's the Rosa I know. The week leading up to his birthday was torture in some ways, but it also gave me clarity. Thomas went about his days as usual, offering kisses, little lies, late nights. I played along, smiled, cooked, nodded when he spoke. All the while, I was carefully compiling my arsenal. Carla delivered everything neatly. Printed photos, time-stamped receipts, surveillance notes, even a timeline of his movements. It was damning. Enough to bury him in divorce court. Enough to strip away his credibility in front of anyone who mattered. At night, when Thomas slept, I would spread the evidence across the dining table and rehearse what I would say. The words needed to cut. They needed to leave scars. But most of all, They needed to be undeniable. Finally, the day arrived. Thomas was in an unusually good mood that morning, whistling as he straightened his tie. "Big night tonight, Rosa. My colleagues can't wait to see you." I smiled sweetly, my heart thudding. "I'm looking forward to it." He kissed me lightly before heading out. "Don't be late," if only he knew. At 7 p.m., the steakhouse buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. The long table was crowded with Thomas's colleagues, glasses of wine in hand, plates of steak steaming. Thomas sat at the head, his smile wide, his voice booming as he toasted to his own success. I sat beside him, silent, my hands folded in my lap. Margaret was there too, posing as a family friend, her eyes burning with the same fury I felt. Thomas draped an arm over my chair, his touch casual, possessive. "To my wonderful wife, Rosa," he said with a smile that made bile rise in my throat. Always by my side, the table clinked glasses. Smiles all around. I lifted mine too, though my hand trembled, and then slowly, I set it down. "Actually," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the noise, "I have something to share tonight." The chatter died instantly. All eyes turned to me. Thomas frowned, confused, but tried to laugh it off. "Rosa, this isn't the time." I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick envelope Carla had prepared. I placed it on the table right in front of him. "This," I said clearly, "is the proof that my husband has been lying to me, and to all of you, for over a year." Gasps, murmurs. Thomas's face drained of color. "Rosa, don't—" I slid the photos across the table. One by one, they spilled into the open. Thomas with Anna at the Italian restaurant. Thomas at the boutique hotel with the blonde. Thomas at the bar with the brunette. Time-stamped, dated, undeniable. His colleagues leaned forward, eyes wide, whispers hissing like snakes around the table. "Rosa!" Thomas hissed, snatching at the photos. "This is insane." "No," I cut him off, my voice rising. "What's insane is thinking you could live 3 lives at once and I'd never notice. What's insane is you smiling in my face while sneaking off to hotels, restaurants, and women who probably don't even know about each other." His jaw worked furiously. "You've lost your mind." "Really?" I snapped, slamming the hotel receipt onto the table. Because the receipts, the photos, the witnesses, and the private investigator all say otherwise. The silence that followed was deafening. His colleagues shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. Margaret leaned back, smirking. "Looks like the party's over, Thomas." I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. My voice trembled, but it carried. "Happy birthday, Thomas. This year your gift is the truth. And next year your gift will be divorce papers." Gasps echoed again. Thomas lunged to grab my arm, but I pulled away. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even look back. I walked out of that steakhouse with my head high, leaving him drowning in the wreckage of his lies. Later, in Margaret's car, I finally let the tears fall. Not for Thomas, not for what we'd lost, but for me, because after years of being silenced by his deceit, I had finally found my voice again, and there was no going back. The silence in Margaret's car on the drive home was heavier than anything I had ever felt. The restaurant's echoes, gasps, whispers, Thomas's panicked denial, still rang in my ears. My chest heaved with the rhythm of someone who had been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. Margaret kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on mine. "You did it, Rosa. You shattered his facade. He can't come back from that." I turned to her, my voice raw. "Then why do I feel like I've just lost everything?" She sighed. "Because you're grieving, Rosa, not him. Not even the marriage, really. You're grieving the woman you used to be, the one who believed him, who trusted him. She's gone now, and that's a loss, too." The words sank deep. She was right. I wasn't the same Rosa who baked his favorite casserole, ironed his shirts, and believed he was really at the office when he smiled that tired smile. That Rosa was dead, but someone new was taking her place. Someone harder. Someone who knew the truth. When we pulled into my driveway, the house loomed like a ghost. Every brick and window seemed to whisper lies. I couldn't bring myself to step inside. I can't sleep in that bed tonight, I muttered. Margaret nodded. Then don't. Come stay with me. He'll expect you here, waiting, still playing your part. Don't give him that satisfaction. I hesitated, then grabbed an overnight bag. Together we left the house dark and silent behind us. At Margaret's I tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas's face at the restaurant, his mask crumbling, his voice desperate. This is insane, Rosa! No, insane was me giving him years of my life, my trust, my loyalty, while he used me as cover for his lies. Around 3 a.m., I got up and paced the guest room. I opened my phone and scrolled through Carla's files again. Anna, the blonde, the brunette. The evidence stacked up like bricks in a wall I could finally hide behind. For the first time, I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered to myself, he doesn't get to control me anymore. Morning came with a storm of calls and messages. One from Thomas, his voice taut. We need to talk. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. This isn't the way, Rosa. I deleted it without listening to the end. Another from Mia. Mom, what happened? Dad called me. He sounded upset. He said you made a scene? My heart clenched. How could he? How dare he drag our daughter into this? I typed and erased several responses before finally sending, Sweetheart, I'll explain when I'm ready. Just know I love you. None of this is your fault. Then there were messages from Thomas's colleagues, some sympathetic, some nosy, and finally, a text from an unknown number. My breath caught as I read it. Rosa, this is Anna. I heard what you did. I'm sorry for everything. If you want to talk, I'll be at the cafe on 7th at noon. I stared at the screen, conflicted. Margaret looked over my shoulder. You don't owe her anything. No, I admitted. But maybe she has answers. Maybe she can tell me things Thomas never would. Margaret frowned but didn't argue. Then I'm coming with you. At noon, the cafe buzzed with quiet conversation. I spotted Anna at a corner table, her red dress traded for a simple sweater. She looked smaller somehow, like a balloon that had lost its air. She stood when she saw me. Rosa, I nodded stiffly. Anna, we sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed. I didn't know, not really. I thought I was the only one. He told me he was leaving you. He said you were unhappy, cold, that he stayed with you for appearances. My stomach turned. He said the same things about you. That you were just a client, a colleague who read too much into his kindness. Her laugh was bitter. He's good, isn't he? Makes you believe you're the only one, when you're just one of many. I studied her face. She looked as broken as I felt. And though part of me wanted to hate her, another part recognized the same betrayal carved into her. Why meet me? I asked, her eyes filled with tears. Because you deserve the truth. And because I need closure too, she leaned forward. There's more, Rosa. He told me things. About accounts, about trips. Places you don't know about. If you're planning to leave him, you'll need it all. My pulse quickened. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Anna laid it out. The hidden credit cards. The secret weekends away. The excuses he rehearsed. Every detail painted a picture of a man who didn't just slip once or twice. He lived in lies. By the time she finished, my notebook was full, my hands shaking. Anna looked at me sadly. I'm sorry, Rosa, for being part of this, for not seeing through him sooner. I closed the notebook. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself. You deserve better, too. We parted with no promises of friendship, but with something like mutual understanding. When I walked back to Margaret's car, I felt both heavier and lighter at once. Did you get what you needed? Margaret asked. I nodded. More than I expected. Enough to bury him. But as I stared out the window, the question echoed in my mind. Was burying him enough? Or did I want him to feel every ounce of pain he'd carved into me? The notebook Anna helped me fill sat on my lap like a loaded weapon. Every page dripped with proof. Names of hotels, dates of trips, accounts Thomas kept hidden from me, even phrases he repeated to each woman. It was chilling, seeing his deceit mapped out so neatly, like a business plan he'd been perfecting for years. Margaret glanced at me as she drove. So, what's next? Divorce lawyer? I stared down at the pages. Yes, but not just that. Her brows furrowed. What do you mean? I closed the notebook slowly. I don't just want to leave him, Margaret. I want him to feel it. Every lie, every betrayal, every time he made me doubt myself, I want him to choke on it. Her lips curved into a grim smile. Now you're talking. That evening, Thomas finally broke his silence and came storming into Margaret's house. He didn't knock. He didn't call ahead. He just barged in, his face flushed with fury. Rosa! His voice boomed in the living room. What the hell do you think you're doing? Parading my personal life in front of colleagues? Humiliating me? I stood, the notebook clutched to my chest. Your personal life? You mean our marriage? The vows you spat on? That's not just your life, Thomas. It's mine too. And you dragged it through the dirt. He jabbed a finger toward me. I made one mistake. One? I cut him off, my voice rising. One mistake doesn't last for years. One mistake doesn't have names, faces, hotels, credit cards. Should I show you the list, Thomas? Should I remind you which nights you were with Anna, or the blonde, or the brunette? His mouth opened, then shut again. His face twisted in anger. You hired someone to spy on me? I held his gaze. I protected myself. Because you never would. Margaret stepped between us then, her voice like steel. You should leave before you dig yourself deeper. Thomas glared at her. Stay out of this. But Margaret didn't move. She was my wall, my shield. Finally, Thomas turned back to me, his voice lower, more dangerous. If you go through with this, Rosa, if you file for divorce, you'll ruin everything. Our reputation, our finances, Mia's future. I took a step forward, my hands shaking but my voice steady. You ruined all of that the moment you decided I wasn't enough. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, with a muttered curse, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I collapsed into a chair, trembling. Margaret knelt beside me. You did good. He's trying to scare you, but he's the one who's terrified. Of what? I whispered. She squeezed my hand. Of losing control. The next morning, I sat in the office of a divorce lawyer named Helen. She was calm, efficient, the kind of woman who had seen it all before. Based on what you've told me, Helen said, flipping through the evidence, this case is strong. With the proof of infidelity, you'll have leverage for assets, alimony, even custody arrangements if your daughter were still a minor. But since she's grown, the fight will mostly be financial. I nodded, numb. And what about his hidden accounts? Helen's eyes sharpened. If we can prove he concealed assets, it will work heavily in your favor. Do you have documents? I slid the notebook across the desk. Every detail. From one of the women. Helen scanned the pages, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. This will bury him. Her confidence bolstered me. For the first time, I felt like I had more than just rage. I had direction. That night, I stayed at Margaret's again. Thomas didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't show up. The silence was deafening, but it was also telling. He was regrouping, plotting his next move. As I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, my mind raced. Yes, I wanted the divorce. Yes, I wanted to end his control, but part of me also wanted to go further, to strip away the polished mask he wore in public, the charming, successful husband everyone admired. Because the truth was, behind that mask, he was nothing but a liar, and I wanted the world to see it. 2 days later, Carla sent me a final message, found one more. A woman in accounting at his firm. Younger, early 20s. He's been buying her gifts. Jewelry, dinners. They met 3 times this month. My blood ran cold. Another one. Always another one. I forwarded the message to Margaret with a single line. He'll never stop. She called me immediately. Then don't let him. You've got what you need, Rosa. You've got more than enough. End it before he drags you down with him. I stared at the screen, my reflection pale and determined in the glass. Not just end it, I murmured. I'm going to destroy the story he tells about himself. No more lies, no more facade. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Then let's make a plan." The next week blurred into motion. Meetings with Helen, calls with Carla, quiet talks with Margaret in the dead of night. And finally, the moment we circled on the calendar, a charity gala Thomas was scheduled to attend. The kind of event where he'd stand tall, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, pretending to be the perfect husband with me at his side. Instead, it would be the night everything fell apart. The night of the gala arrived. I stood in front of the mirror, my red dress clinging to me like armor. Margaret adjusted the necklace at my throat, her hands steady. "You look powerful," she said softly. I met my own gaze in the mirror. "I feel powerful." I picked up the envelope, photos, receipts, copies of the notebook. My weapon, and as I slipped it into my clutch, I whispered to myself, "He has no idea what's coming." The gala shimmered with gold chandeliers, polished marble floors, and the hum of polite conversation. Men in tuxedos laughed too loudly over their glasses of bourbon, while women in gowns sparkled like jewels under the lights. On the surface, it was elegance, but to me it felt like a stage. And Thomas? He was at the center of it, playing his role to perfection. I spotted him across the room almost instantly, laughing, shaking hands, leaning close to whisper something charming in a woman's ear. His tuxedo was pressed, his smile practiced, and to anyone else, he looked like a man at the peak of success. But I knew better. I adjusted my clutch in my hand, the weight of the envelope steady and reassuring. Tonight, his mask would shatter. Margaret brushed past me, murmuring, "Remember, Rosa, timing. Don't let him see it coming. When he's most comfortable, when he thinks he owns the room, that's when you strike." I nodded, inhaling slowly to calm the storm inside me. As the evening dragged on, Thomas eventually made his way to me. His smile flickered for a split second when he saw I was there, but he quickly recovered, wrapping an arm around my waist for the benefit of the crowd. "Darling," he said, his voice warm enough to fool anyone else. "You look stunning tonight." I forced a smile. "Thank you." His grip tightened, a subtle warning. "We'll talk later," he muttered under his breath, his smile never faltering for the crowd. "Of course," I murmured sweetly, though my pulse thundered. We moved through the room together, his colleagues and acquaintances nodding approvingly at the image we projected. The power couple. The devoted wife, the successful husband. Every handshake, every compliment made bile rise in my throat. And then the moment came. The MC tapped the microphone, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Thomas Whitaker, our guest of honor tonight, to the stage." Applause erupted. Thomas beamed, releasing me to stride confidently toward the podium. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and began his speech. "I want to thank everyone here tonight," he said smoothly. "This cause is dear to me, and I'm proud to support it, not just as a professional, but as a husband, a father, and a man who values integrity above all else." That word, integrity, was my trigger. Margaret's eyes met mine across the room. She gave a subtle nod. My legs carried me forward before I had time to second guess. I walked to the stage, clutch in hand, my heels clicking loudly against the marble. The crowd shifted, murmuring, curious. Thomas's smile faltered. "Rosa?" he whispered, his voice caught between charm and panic. I took the microphone from the MC, my hands steady, my voice strong. "Integrity," I said, my eyes sweeping the room. "That's a powerful word, and it's one my husband has no right to use." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Thomas froze, his face pale, his jaw clenched. I opened my clutch and pulled out the envelope. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rosa, Thomas's wife. The woman who stood beside him for over 2 decades. The woman who believed in him, trusted him, built a life with him." I held up a photo, Thomas with Anna at the Italian restaurant, his hand over hers. The projector behind us lit up as Margaret discreetly handed the tech assistant a USB drive we'd prepared. Suddenly, the screen flashed with images. Thomas in hotel lobbies, Thomas buying flowers for another woman, Thomas kissing a brunette outside his office. Gasps grew louder. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into outrage. "This," I said, my voice breaking but strong, "is the man who preaches integrity while living a life built on lies. A man who has betrayed not only me, but multiple women, women who didn't even know about each other." Thomas lunged toward me, his hand outstretched, but I stepped back. "Don't! Not this time." The room was chaos now, colleagues whispering, women staring, men shaking their heads. The image of Thomas's double life blazed across the room, undeniable, inescapable. I turned back to the crowd, my chest rising and falling. You all deserve to know who he really is. Not the polished man who stands here smiling, but the liar who hides behind that smile. Then I lowered the microphone, looked directly at Thomas, and whispered so only he could hear. "Happy gala, Thomas. Your curtain's down." I handed the microphone back to the MC, tucked the clutch under my arm, and walked off the stage. Margaret was waiting at the door. Together we left the ballroom as voices rose behind us, angry, shocked, gossiping, and for the first time in months, I felt free. But as we drove away into the night, Margaret turned to me, her expression cautious. "You know he's not going to take this lying down, right?" I stared out the window, the lights of the city blurring. I don't care. He can fight. He can scream. He can try to save what's left of his reputation. But I'm done being silent. He doesn't own me anymore. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart. "No matter what he does next," I whispered. "He's already lost." The fallout from the gala was immediate. By morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Some numbers I recognized, neighbors, distant cousins, old friends. Others I didn't. Everyone had heard. Everyone wanted a piece of the scandal. Some messages dripped with pity. "Rosa, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this." Others were sharper, judgmental. "Why air it out in public? Couldn't you keep it private?" But the one that mattered most came from Mia. "Mom, I saw the video. It's all over. Please tell me it's not true." My hands shook as I typed. "It is true, sweetheart. I wanted you to hear it from me first, but your father left me no choice." "I'm sorry." Her reply came quickly. "I don't want to talk to Dad right now. Can I come home this weekend?" Tears burned my eyes. "Of course, Mia, always." Margaret placed a hand on my shoulder. "She's angry at him, not you. Let her process. You've protected her more than you know." Still, guilt gnawed at me. Mia had grown up believing her father was the perfect man, and now I had torn that image apart in front of the world. But then I reminded myself, it wasn't me who shattered it. It was Thomas. Thomas didn't call that day. Not once, but his lawyer did. By evening, a manila envelope arrived at Margaret's door, delivered by courier. Inside were preliminary divorce filings, filed by Thomas. He wanted to frame it as his decision. His terms. I skimmed through the papers, my jaw tightening. He claimed irreconcilable differences. No mention of his affairs, no acknowledgement of fault. He even tried to suggest splitting assets evenly, as though his betrayals didn't matter. Margaret scoffed. Typical. He's trying to get ahead of you. Make it look clean, civilized, his choice. But you've got the evidence, Rosa. You've got leverage. Don't you dare let him dictate this. I called Helen, my lawyer, immediately. She assured me we were prepared. He wants clean? We'll give him messy. With proof like yours, you'll walk away with what you deserve. It should have comforted me, but instead it left me restless. Because if I knew Thomas, and I did, this wasn't about money. This was about control. And if he couldn't control the story anymore, he'd find another way to control me. Sure enough, 2 nights later, he showed up at Margaret's house. It was nearly midnight. The street quiet when headlights flared outside. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps on the porch. Then pounding on the door. "Rosa!" His voice thundered through the wood. "Open this door right now." Margaret appeared at my side instantly, her phone in hand. "Say the word and I'll call the cops." But I shook my head. "No, let me handle him." I opened the door just enough to see him. His face was red, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. He looked less like the polished man from the gala and more like someone unraveling. "What do you want, Thomas?" I asked coldly. He shoved a hand against the doorframe. "You humiliated me. Do you have any idea what you've done? My colleagues won't return my calls. My boss put me on leave. Everyone is whispering behind my back." I lifted my chin. "Good, now you know how it feels." His nostrils flared. "You think this is a game? Rosa, you're destroying everything we built. Everything you rely on, by the way. The house, the savings. Do you really think you'll walk away with all of it?" I met his gaze, unwavering. "I don't want your house. I don't want your money. I want my life back." His expression faltered for a split second, but then anger returned. "You'll regret this. When the lawyers are done tearing us apart, when Mia looks at you differently, you'll regret every move you've made." I took a step forward, the edge in my voice sharp enough to cut. "No, Thomas. The only regret I have is not seeing you clearly sooner. The only one Mia will look at differently is you. Because you're not the man you pretended to be. Not to her, not to me, not to anyone." He opened his mouth, but Margaret stepped forward, phone raised. "Leave, now, or I call the police and report harassment." His glare flicked between us, but finally, with a growl of frustration, he stormed off. The tires screeched as he sped into the night. I closed the door, my heart pounding. Margaret wrapped an arm around me. "He's desperate now, and desperate men make mistakes. That's when we win." The following day, Carla called with news. "You should know," she said. "Thomas has been trying to contact the other women. Anna, the blonde, the brunette, even the girl at his office. He's scrambling to get them on his side. Probably to discredit you." I clenched my fists. "Let him try. They know the truth now. Just like I do." But her words reminded me of something darker. Thomas wasn't done fighting. He wasn't going to fade quietly into the shadows. He'd claw, manipulate, twist until he thought he could rebuild his mask, which meant I had to stay 2 steps ahead. That night, as I sat at Margaret's dining table with Helen's legal documents spread out, I realized something. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. It was about survival, because Thomas wasn't just a liar. He was a man who had built his identity on lies, and now that I had ripped them away, he was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were dangerous. I looked at Margaret, my voice steady. "We've exposed him to the world. We've taken away his mask. Now it's time to take away his power too." Her eyes gleamed. "What do you have in mind?" I tapped the stack of documents, my pulse steady. "I'm going to make sure that when this is over, Thomas doesn't just lose me. He loses everything." The last chapter of this mess didn't arrive with a crash or a cinematic revelation. It came in paperwork, phone calls, whispered conversations in lawyers' offices, and the quiet, grinding machinery of institutions doing what institutions do: process, review, adjudicate. It was slow. It was precise. It was, in the end, unstoppable. The morning after Thomas's late-night threat, Helen called with the next step. "You did right by exposing him," she said, her voice both compassionate and efficient. "Now we make sure you're protected while the fallout runs its course. Asset freeze, temporary restraining order if necessary, and we file responsive papers to his motion. We'll also serve notice to his employer about the conduct and provide them with the evidence. Let them do the rest." I listened to her and felt the strange sensation of control settle like a cool band around my chest. For months I had been pushed, vaulted, tossed by Thomas's every maneuver. Now I was the one choosing. Now I had options lined up and people taking action for me. Carla continued to be the secret engine behind the scenes, meticulous, unemotional, and devastating in her competence. She handed over the final folder of corroborating photos, hotel receipts, text logs, and timestamps. "I also got statements from 2 of the women," she told me one afternoon, leaning across Margaret's kitchen table. They don't want public drama, but they'll sign affidavits supporting the timeline. That's the closure we need. You did all this for me, I said, choking back something I could not name. She shrugged. Not for you. For the truth. The company where Thomas worked reacted faster and more ruthlessly than I expected. Within 48 hours of Helen's letter and the USB drive that played the gala footage on loop for their legal team, HR had frozen his accounts, the board had convened an emergency meeting, and a terse email landed in my inbox. An investigation had been opened. He was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending findings. News travels in rumors and rumors travel in people. By the end of that week, a handful of his closest colleagues had called, not to console, but to distance themselves. A few messages were meaner, predictably defensive. But more were quietly supportive of me, if only because they had a new understanding of who Thomas had been. He had been the charming, affable recruiter who charmed donors and clients. Now he was a cautionary tale in suits. Thomas tried to weaponize the women I'd spoken to. He called them, begged, pleaded, threatened. He hired a crisis PR firm to spin his version: a contrite man, a marriage in trouble, misinterpreted gestures, and inappropriate boundaries. He tried to paint me as vengeful, attention-seeking, excessive. The only thing his spin achieved was to make him look more frantic. People who had met him for a lifetime were seeing for the first time a man dismantled by his own lies. What shocked me most was how quickly some of the other women reacted to Thomas's attempts at control. Anna, whom I had met at the cafe, sent me a message. They came to me. They begged me to say it was all a misunderstanding. I said no. I'll sign the affidavit. I'm sorry. The blonde sent a shorter note. I'm done with him. File what you need. One by one, the women who had been used as excuses for his selfish pursuits stepped away from his shadow, and in doing so, lent their testimony to the truth. Their courage steadied me like a hand on the small of my back. Mia came home that weekend. She arrived with a duffel bag and a world of questions folded into silence. When she hugged me, she smelled faintly of campus laundry detergent and a new kind of wariness. How long? She asked when we finally sat down in Margaret's living room, the room that had become my refuge. I told her everything that mattered and nothing she didn't need yet. I told her about receipts and hotels, about phone messages and the gala. I told her, bluntly, that her father had been a man who thought not getting caught meant he was free, and that he had made choices that were his alone. I told her I regretted the pain she would feel, but I did not regret the truth she deserved. She cried. She cursed. She called her father and hung up. She called her friends, and then her professors, and then she came back to the house and sat in a corner and read a book like a soldier waiting for a new assignment. The conversations with Mia were the hardest and the most healing I had. They were also the most honest. She asked what she wanted to know, and she let me be the one who told her. That mattered. The legal process moved as it does, deliberate, procedural, armored against theatrics. Thomas's lawyer pushed for mediation. My lawyer said no. We would not be silenced into a quick separation without accounting. Helen wanted to make sure the settlement reflected the hidden accounts Carla had uncovered. Money channeled into offshore cards, hotel room blocks, gifts shipped to other addresses. The financial picture that came together in court filings was ugly, but it was factual. It was also damning. There were nights when my guts tightened with fear. Thomas did not go quietly. He lashed out in the small ways men like him do. Veiled threats, accusations, a smear campaign that tried to present me as unstable to distant family members. He showed up once at my office building, lingering in the parking lot until security escorted him away. He attempted to get mutual friends to take his side. He tried to bait me into compromise, but each attempt made him look more brittle. He was, in effect, digging a deeper hole by flinging more dirt around himself. The judge ultimately issued preliminary orders that protected my immediate needs. Exclusive use of the house until matters were settled. Temporary support payments, and a restriction on contact with Mia unless through a monitored channel. Those rulings, temporary and not final, gave me breathing space. They also enraged Thomas further, but the point was that the mechanisms that protect people existed and could be used. I hadn't known until then how much comfort a court order could bring. In the months that followed, the discovery process spilled everything into daylight. The list of women who had been involved in Thomas's life, some brief, some longer, grew. Carla's thoroughness meant there were receipts for most of them, bank transfer records for gifts, and even a credit card Thomas had opened under a false business name that tracked thousands of dollars in dinners and rooms. Helen argued for full asset disclosure and forensic accounting. Thomas tried to fight, but a combination of his company's legal concerns and the pressure from multiple affidavits made his position untenable. The company eventually terminated him. The board issued a short, impersonal statement about conduct not in keeping with corporate values. It felt strangely fitting. His name was scrubbed from the donor lists, his faces from the website's leadership photos. People stopped asking after his well-being. The ripple effect of truth can be cruel, but often it is necessary. We settled out of court, not because I forgave him or because I wanted to minimize the pain, but because dragging it into a public trial would have been taking Mia's private hurt and pouring it into a trough for strangers to gawk at. Helen negotiated aggressively. The settlement gave me the house, a fair distribution of liquid assets, and a clean break on child-related financials. Mia was legally independent. It was not revenge. It was protection and a restored safety net. For the first time in years, I felt like an adult who had regained her life. The emotional work took longer. There were therapy sessions, individual and briefly family-oriented. I cried in rooms designed for that purpose. I wrote lists of what I wanted to rebuild: friendships, hobbies, a small savings plan for travel. Margaret moved a few of her plants into my house, rearranged the living room, and refused to let me redecorate in grayscale. "You get to pick colors now," she said. "No more neutrals for Rosa. No more fading into the background." Mia and I healed in increments. She moved back for a semester, then decided to stay a little longer, to help with small repairs around the house, to keep me company in the kitchen where we once cooked as a family. Cooking together, I realized, was less about recipes and more about ritual, anchoring us in something ordinary and true. We made her favorite dinners. We watched old sitcoms late at night and mocked their tidy endings. Slowly, laughter returned to the corners of the house. Thomas? He had to rebuild a life without the things he had leaned on. Status, the complicity of secrecy, the illusion of power. There were consequences that were practical: loss of job, loss of face, loss of trust. There were also consequences I couldn't wish on anyone. They were the natural fruits of so many small betrayals. I didn't take joy in his fall. I took solace in the fact that the truth had unseated him. Karma, I'd heard someone call it once in a soap opera. I preferred to think of it as justice. In the quiet months after the legal dust settled, I began to sketch out a plan for my own life. I found a small studio space and signed up for evening classes, photography, because I loved capturing truth in images rather than hiding from it. I started a blog. First posts were rough, full of raw edges, about reinvention, living honestly, mother-daughter bonds. People messaged me from everywhere. Some sent sympathy, most sent stories of their own betrayals and recoveries. The chorus of voices surprised and steadied me. Standing on my porch one spring morning, a year after the first receipt changed everything, I felt the house steady under my feet. The roses I'd once pruned were back, blooming stubbornly. The barrow of sky over the street was the same, but I had changed. I had lived through humiliation and fear, and with help, come out the other side. Mia came out of the house with 2 mugs of coffee. We stood there, shoulders almost touching, and watched the street wake up. She nudged my arm. "You okay?" she asked with the mixture of bluntness and care only a daughter can offer. I smiled. "I'm okay." "We're okay," she grinned back. "Good. Also, your blog is getting traffic. Don't be weird about it." I laughed then, a real laugh, and it felt like a bell ringing. The sound bounced down the street and back into the open air. I had lost a man who had lied to me for years. I had gained the truth, and with it, the hard work of rebuilding. There would be anniversaries that stung. There would be questions that set off old alarms. Some nights I still curled tight with anger and exhaustion. But I had a list now of things to do, places to see, people to forgive, not everyone, not yet, and ways to love that were mine, not borrowed from anyone else. On the top shelf of my bedroom closet, under a stack of sweaters, I still kept the crumpled receipt from that Italian restaurant the first night I learned to look. It wasn't a relic of pain anymore. It was a marker of where I'd been and how far I'd come. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw a woman who had made a terrible, brave choice. A woman who had said no to a life built on lies and yes to a life she could live with her head high. And that, in the end, was everything.